You're watching Captains here on CNBC Africa, and I'm chatting to Sizwe Nxasana, outgoing CEO of FirstRand. Thanks very much for your time. 8 years at Telkom, 9 years within the FirstRand group, and the majority of those at the helm. 5 years as CEO of FirstRand, and prior to that you headed up the bank, which pretty much was 80% or is 80% of the group. You've stated on numerous occasions a CEO's lifespan is 10 years. So you're making your next move again, just short of that 10-year period.
That's correct. I've always believed that for my own personal development, as well as for the sake of the organization, it is important to have new ideas, new energy, but for me to also try new things. I always believe in taking myself out of my comfort zone, and I've done that a few times before, and learning new things and getting involved in new challenges. And this is was a very ideal time, given where I am right now, even in terms of age. And when I look forward and think, God willing, I still have another 25 years or so to go and start new things, to get involved in new things.
Talk a bit about where you are going. Obviously, your wife has been mentioned, who is a very successful businesswoman in her own right, Dr. Judy Dlamini. And it appears from initial reports that you are going to be working very closely with her in the family business to grow that across Africa. Obviously, again, Dr. Dlamini being the chairwoman of Aspen, and also involved in real estate, medical supplies, and surgical instruments. So this is going to be a new challenge for you.
Yeah, absolutely correct. At the end of the day, though, even though we're going to be working very closely together, I don't believe it's ever a good idea to have two bosses in one crawl. In other words, she's accustomed to running her own businesses and so on, but as a family, there are other opportunities that we see, in addition to the ones that you've mentioned, which include retail as well, to start new businesses, because as I've said before, this country, as well as this continent, presents many opportunities for entrepreneurs. I've run businesses before, we've started businesses together before, and I do believe with my experience and what I've gained, in my previous incarnations, it is about time to get back to that entrepreneurial space.
You believe that, and again, you've been widely quoted as saying that South Africa imports, and Africa imports, too many things. We need to look at, and I'm presuming here, beneficiation, as well as providing our own solutions to whether it's health challenges or financial challenges, pretty much still in that entrepreneurial space.
Absolutely. You just need to think of the human's basic needs, from water to housing to communications to power to whatever to food. All of these just basic needs that we have as human beings present opportunities, and quite a lot of them in the continent are actually supplied by companies that import things, and therefore I do believe that there's an opportunity to get involved in some of these areas.
In the Sunday Times this week, you were quoted as saying that you do not believe that the private sector is responsible for the lack of BEE traction in the country, for want of a better phrase. You believe that BEE, or the lack of broad-based black economic empowerment, really lies at the feet of government. Regulation, perhaps inappropriate regulation. Can you elaborate on that stance?
Well, let's just take an example of the current discussion that's taking place in South Africa today around creating and supporting black industrialists. I think it's a very important discussion. It's one that I believe is overdue. And my statement was exactly with regards to the previous focus of black economic empowerment in South Africa was mainly around equity ownership. And in fact, not even equity ownership in startup businesses or new businesses that would support entrepreneurship, but it was equity ownership in established businesses, which was important.
And President Jacob Zuma is claiming that there's 3% equity ownership, black equity ownership in JSE-listed companies. That's what you were disputing.
No, I'm saying, neither the JSE nor, in fact, the statements that have been made around the 3% ownership are necessarily correct. Because, you've got to understand the ownership of the markets, especially the JSE as an equity market, and strip out a lot of the things like institutions and so on. But obviously, I mean, if you look at updating the information that the JSE may have done already with some of the transactions that have matured more recently, you're probably going to find that the numbers are different from the numbers because the study was done 2-3 years ago. I have not read the study itself myself, but I do believe it was done based on information that was collated a couple of years ago. So it needs to be updated. I think there needs to be a reorientation of where the BEE is going to be focusing going forward. And the point really is, like for instance now, as a financial sector charter, we're looking at the role that we as banks or the financial services industry broadly can play in supporting black industrialists. So if government creates a particular framework or a particular environment or regulations in a particular direction, the private sector merely follows. And that's the point that I was making.
Perhaps I can just drill down a little further into this discussion, because BEE, as we know it, hasn't worked in South Africa. We have seen a few black individuals getting richer and richer through investment at an equity level, rather than that broad-based black economic empowerment that we should have been striving for as a country. And it's the country's fault. We probably took our eye off the ball and didn't focus on the fact that we need depth and breadth in our BEE initiatives. Can we solve this? Can we rectify very quickly the problems that have been created?
Yeah, let me just make a correction. I don't think it's a mistake. I don't think it's entirely a mistake or a bad thing that you have a few people who've made millions or even billions of rands in benefiting from black economic empowerment. I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. The country does need a few people. We have, as a country, decided on a mixed economy, which means you're going to have private enterprise and the state or public enterprise playing a role in the economy. So, of course, the number of things that we could have done better with the benefit of hindsight. We could have done better in encouraging entrepreneurship. We could have done better in emphasizing more broad-based ownership. But I do not agree with the fact that we have a few billionaires is necessarily a bad thing. The whole world, actually, especially where private enterprise is concerned, will always have a few people who are going to do better than others. You're going to have few people who are billionaires and some who...
It's capitalism, isn't it?
That's just how it goes, absolutely.
But how do we facilitate this broad-based black economic empowerment?
Well, the number of opportunities that exist in creating the broad-based nation, I mean, you just need to look at issues that we confront as challenges as a country, whether it's education or health or the unemployment or poverty. There are mechanisms, some of them are present already, in terms of trusts or organizations that would make sure that the beneficiaries are much broader, much wider than what we've seen up to now. And some of them are already there. I mean, I can, for instance, quote the example of the 3 broad-based trusts that were part of the FirstRand Black Economic Empowerment transaction. So we have the Mine Workers Investment Trust, we have the WDB Trust, which benefits women, a lot of them, thousands, and you have Kagiso Trust. And the beneficiaries of a significant portion of the 23 billion rand that has now actually been made out of the FirstRand BEE transaction is going to benefit a whole lot of people as opposed to just a few individuals.
You've spoken about the lack of trust between labour, business and government as being a crucial problem to being able to solve the country's problems. And you, again, you've been quoted as saying when you were at Telkom, even though Telkom was a state-owned enterprise, there was still, you weren't brought into the inner circle as business, and yet you should have seen that close working between government and business within the Telkom stable. How do we facilitate that? I mean, you look at the National Education Collaboration Trust, which you've put together, which brings labour, business and government, or you're one of the parties behind forging this strong collaboration in education. Can we fast track this trust between labour, government and business?
I think it's important. I don't think we have an option, especially in South Africa, given our past, other than to make sure that we bring the different stakeholders together, particularly business and government, in driving some of the issues that we need to confront as a country. And having said so, we have the National Development Plan today, which calls for active citizenship. And it's created opportunities, actually, that we see already. The communication between business, especially represented either by Business Unity South Africa or BLSA, which is Business Leadership South Africa, with government, has improved by order of magnitude since the NDP was adopted as a policy of South Africa. So we've made a start, but the point I always make is that working on projects, like for instance, there's a power crisis in South Africa now, or there's a crisis in education, and there are issues that we need to address in health, is not necessarily going to address the trust deficit. There needs to be a different conversation about the kind of relationship that we need as South Africa between business and government. Because when you go to any country, you can go to Malaysia or Germany or the US or France, there's either a written or unwritten code about the relationship between business and government. All governments are going to have some element of mistrust of the private sector, especially in a capitalist system. However, we take it to another level. I think we need to do something about it.
Sizwe, 2 weeks ago I sat down with the Finance Minister Nxasanas and a group of business leaders from Business Leadership South Africa. We were discussing the National Development Plan. One of the key elements that came across over and over from the business contingent is the lack of communication over the Eskom issue particularly, that there's no news forthcoming from the Eskom war room, so to speak, and that part of building that trust is about keeping everybody in the loop, no matter how bad the situation is. Do you think that that is a fair criticism, that there is a lack of communication and that in itself could help create trust?
Absolutely. I think it is important, especially in a crisis situation, for parties that are involved, especially in this particular case that you mentioned, with the power crisis in the country, for government to take its citizens into its own confidence. And obviously for Eskom to play a particularly important role in that, because without that we can never plan and assist in the resolution of the problem. As an example, if we all knew that we have to reduce our power consumption by, let's say, 15%, I'm just taking a number, and we knew that that 15% was going to allow Eskom, for instance, to have scheduled maintenance, that regardless of whether they were utilizing all that capacity or not, it will give them space to deal with the issues that they're dealing with. Then we can all organize our lives. We can all plan. In fact, we can even make a contribution to how the problems can be resolved, as opposed to, there's a war room, but in fact, we don't quite know what's happening.
Kind of a black hole right now.
Absolutely.
In terms of communication flow. But this must be relatively easy to rectify. Do you think it's going to happen? That everyone's going to start communicating better?
I'm hoping it's going to happen. And obviously, the recent announcements, of the suspension of people at Eskom
after 3 months
does not create confidence in that the problem is going to be resolved, or that the war room itself is going to work efficiently.
I'm chatting to Sizwe Nxasana, outgoing CEO of the FirstRand Group. You're watching Captains on CNBC Africa. You're watching Captains here on CNBC Africa. I'm chatting to Sizwe Nxasana, outgoing CEO of FirstRand. Let's chat a bit about FirstRand and the recent results. A fantastic set of results, 24% return on equity. That's the best of the big four banks out there. The market was slightly concerned about the excessive caution, as they are terming it, that was put forward over the rest of Africa corporate book, given the fallout in the oil price and commodities. However, there are those who have praised FirstRand for the prudent provisioning.
No, obviously I'm part of the team that decided it was prudent for us to have these provisions, because the issue is, if you look at our exposures to oil, gas and mineral resources, given what's happened to the prices, whether it's copper or iron ore or oil or gas, we just don't know what the secondary impacts of the decline in prices is going to be on especially some of the economies that are producing these commodities.
Sizwe, you look at Nigeria, forecasts are that they're going to lose 1% on their GDP as a result of the fall in the oil price. So from a 6.5% 2014 GDP growth forecast to 5.5% for 2015. So there are many who agree with you. This is a very big problem for Africa.
So, I mean, if I was an investor, would I rather support a company or invest in a company that was more cautious, more prudent, or would I invest in a company that was not? I would certainly invest in a company that was a bit more prudent and more cautious. So, I mean, we've taken into account the fact that we would have not had a default at the moment. I think it's important to clarify that. We haven't had a default at the moment. However, we do understand that there is going to be an impact on some of the counters. We just don't know what it is going to be. We don't know what the impact on the broader economies are going to be, particularly as far as Nigeria, Angola, and to some lesser degree, even Ghana is concerned. So we have exposures to these markets. So we took a conservative view, and we believe it's exactly the right thing to do.
So going back to that 24% ROE and then your dividend cover of 1.9 times, is this as good as it's going to get for FirstRand?
I don't believe so. We still have a huge amount of tank in our engine to grow, to continue to grow going forward. Clearly, the macroeconomic environment, especially in South Africa, is tough. But our job, or the job of management, is to outperform the tough macroeconomic environment that we find ourselves in. There are a number of opportunities for us to continue growing the business. If you look at, for instance, the profit pools in which we participate. In the corporate space, we have opportunities there. Our business is still pretty small, given our size. In areas such as the wealth or the premium segment, we have opportunities there. We've just started an asset management company. It has a lot of runway to grow still. As well as if you look at just, the businesses that we're starting, such as insurance, both short-term as well as life insurance, we have opportunities to continue to grow in those businesses. As we continue to scale up our operations, especially in our smaller operations in 6 countries, in Mozambique, Zambia, Tanzania, Nigeria, India, as well as Ghana, that we hope to be up and running in by the middle of the year.
Has Africa grown as effectively as you think it should have over your tenure?
I think we have grown. We must take into account that our own preference is always to protect shareholder value on the one side, as well as make sure that we understand the interplay between growth, risk-taking, and returns. And that's quite important. If you look at that tripartite, we try and manage that really carefully. And right now, we would not have achieved the kind of returns on equity that we are achieving had we not been able to balance the equation in managing those 3.
FirstRand non-executive chairman Laurie Dippenaar has been quoted as saying that you have done a magnificent job at the helm of FirstRand, and they've come forward and offered you a position that doesn't currently exist, and that is as a non-executive deputy chair of FirstRand from 2017. I haven't seen whether you've accepted that position yet. Is it still under consideration?
It is absolutely under consideration, but I have a little bit of time because I've asked for time off, and it is important actually to also have a cool-off period, just so that we can allow the new management to take the business forward before I come back as a non-executive director. That is if I decide to do that.
The market is getting very excited because already the headlines are out there that you potentially will be the first black chairman of the FirstRand Group. Are we getting ahead of ourselves?
I think we're getting ahead of ourselves. We still have another 18 months or so before we get there.
Let's talk about the Africa opportunity that you see for yourself outside of the FirstRand Group. You've mentioned technology as a key player in your life going forward. Potentially it has already been in your family business. Can you again elaborate on how technology is going to shape your future?
Well, technology cuts across everything that we do in business today. So we just see a number of opportunities. Obviously, they're going to be in the private business space, and therefore we're not going to be operating, at least for now, as a publicly traded company, and therefore, it's better for us to just keep it private. But we see massive opportunities in the technology space. We see massive opportunities in just meeting basic demands.
Particularly in Africa, in the rest of Africa.
Absolutely.
Your leadership style has been described as unassuming but firm. Do you feel that that is a fair description?
I think it's for other people to judge that. I'm just who I am, and I do things in a particular way. I don't believe in being out there and being loud and things like that. But I have a few ideas on things and I have a view on things.
Do you delegate? Are you a good delegator?
I think I am. I think that's particularly one of the key successes that we've had at FirstRand, that the culture itself, even before I joined FirstRand, I always used to admire the culture which empowers people, which attracts the best talent and retains the best talent, and you get people to get on with it. That's the kind of culture that has, to a very large degree, been responsible for the successes that we've achieved at FirstRand.
How do you respond to the criticism that is now leveled at Johan Burger, Alan Pullinger being CEO and Deputy CEO, and that there is lack of visibility of empowerment in the top ranks within the FirstRand group? Do you think that's an unfair criticism?
Well, transformation and diversity is really important. But at this particular point in time in FirstRand, Johan Berger is exactly the right person to take the organization forward, and Alan Pullinger as a deputy working in partnership is going to be quite key, in taking the company forward. I think what's important is how much have we done in terms of transforming particularly the top leadership of the whole group. And if you look at that, I think we've made significant progress. Of course, there are areas where I would have liked us to have made a bit more progress, especially as far as African women are concerned. Because we all in this private sector still have an issue, and in fact a challenge in terms of transforming our companies in that regard. However, if you consider that today about 50% of the ExCo, which is the top leadership at FNB, is black, about 47% here at the FirstRand Corporate Center, and about 40% at WesBank, I think we've made significant progress in terms of transformation. And those people are going to be future leaders of this company going forward.
Talk about the small and medium businesses out there that are key to the economy. And you, again, have been very passionate in your commentary around entrepreneurs and black entrepreneurs, and that we need to do more to help entrepreneurs, South African entrepreneurs.
Well, the number of things that are important if we're going to promote entrepreneurship in South Africa, they range from the laws and regulations. You mentioned my family has a number of businesses, and some of those businesses are small and medium businesses. I cannot tell you how difficult it is to navigate, for instance, the labor laws in this country if you are a medium-sized or small business, because it's the same laws that apply to us as large companies. Us as a large company, or large companies in the country, have a whole battery of people who can go and sit at the CCMA or the Labour Court and deal with the issues. If you are a medium-sized or small enterprise, it is really difficult. The second thing is, this country has big business, big labour, very powerful, and big government, which is very powerful. And all these things sort of conspire, in my view, against small and medium businesses, including the fact that we have a whole raft of laws. We have just a lot of things that make it difficult, including access to finance, including the education and training around entrepreneurship, because I do believe entrepreneurship can be or needs to be trained or needs to be, one of the subjects at schools, as an example. We're making some adjustments in that regard. For instance, you're starting now to see the revival of technical colleges, the revival of FET colleges that are looking at skills that are not just technical skills, but entrepreneurship skills. We need to do the same at universities and universities of technology to train people about entrepreneurship, the ins and outs, how you start a business, create a whole ecosystem. For instance, this country does not have venture capitalists, as an example, where if you need money, it's either you go to family and friends or you go to a bank. And very often, if it's a startup business, it's really difficult to get finance from a bank, including from the development financial institutions, who typically compete with us, commercial banks.
You've been working 15-hour days, probably for the last 9 years. It's going to get even tougher now. So do you expect your days to be longer?
Yeah, they're probably going to be longer, especially if you're starting something new. You get involved and you get stuck in it, and you have to make sure that it works. But I'm accustomed to that. In fact, it's not just the 9 years, because if I really cast my mind back, from the time that in 1989 that I started Sizwe Company. You know, I was working more than 15 hours a day or even more, including weekends then. At least over the last couple of years, when I was in a corporate environment, I had a little bit of a luxury of time. For instance, you know, Saturdays were sort of sacrosanct. I didn't do much work on a Saturday. Yes, you start work on a Sunday again, but when you're an entrepreneur, it's 24/7.
You must be slightly nervous because your routine is going to change dramatically. Your support structures are going to change dramatically. Are you a little trepidatious about what the future holds? Excited?
Excited, but you know, obviously I'm going into uncharted waters, you know, but I've been there before, and this is what I love about what I do, and maybe even how I do things, because, you know, taking myself out of comfort zone is always difficult, and sometimes it's uncertain. You just don't know how things are going to pan out. But, you know, it's important. Fortunately for me, I'm quite easy maintenance. In other words, you know, maybe having been a consultant and having worked in starting my firm before, I know how it's like to make my own bookings, my own travel arrangements, manage my own diary, and I can, you know, pretty much navigate the computer or even all these devices that we have available today. I don't have a problem at all. And so I can pretty much survive on my own.
Sizwe, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for your time. Sizwe Nxasana, outgoing CEO of the FirstRand Group.